You the guy the general sent? The words sliced through the air like shrapnel, dripping with disbelief and barely concealed mockery. Lieutenant Miller stood there, arms crossed, staring down at the old man in the faded flannel shirt. Gerald Walsh, 78 years old, said nothing. He just held his canvas tool bag, the one that looked like it had survived a war. Maybe because it had. Miller's eyes landed on the ugly, handmade wrench peeking out from the bag. He laughed, a short, cruel sound. What are you going to do with that? Beat the tank into submission? The insult hung in the air, heavy and bitter. But Miller had no idea. That wrench had already won a war, and it was about to win again. The maintenance bay was a cathedral of modern warfare, vast enough that voices echoed off steel beams and concrete walls. The smell of diesel fuel, hydraulic fluid, and hot metal hung thick in the air like incense. For 3 days, this cathedral had been a place of failed prayers. At the center of it all sat the M1 Abrams tank, 70 tons of American steel and fury. Silent and broken. Its massive turret, designed to swing with deadly precision, now groaned and stuttered like an old man with bad knees. Around it, a dozen young engineers in digital camouflage hunched over glowing laptops, their faces lit by screens filled with error codes and diagnostic readings. They had thrown everything at this problem. Quantum diagnostics, sensor sweeps, manual overrides. Every test came back the same, system nominal. Yet the turret refused to move right. It was a ghost in the machine, and it was mocking them. Lieutenant Miller was in charge of this disaster, and his patience had evaporated 12 hours ago. He was a product of West Point, a believer in algorithms and data. He saw the world in ones and zeros, in problems that could be solved by better software. And now General Thompson, the man who could make or break his career, had sent him this, an old man with a bag of rusty tools. Miller watched Gerald kneel beside the tank, pressing his ear against the cold steel hull, tapping it gently with a thin metal rod. The absurdity was almost offensive. Here they were, armed with millions of dollars in diagnostic equipment, and this relic was listening to the tank like it was a sick patient. A few of the younger engineers snickered, exchanging glances that said what they were all thinking. This is the secret weapon? This is the Hail Mary? Sir, I need you to step away from the vehicle, Miller said, his voice hardening with authority. This is sensitive military hardware, not some classic car in your garage. Gerald did not respond. He just kept listening, his weathered hand flat against the turret ring. Miller felt his jaw tighten. He turned to Master Sergeant Evans, a grizzled NCO who had been watching the whole scene with an unreadable expression. Sergeant, find out who cleared this man for access. I want him off my floor. Now. Evans hesitated. He had seen the general's name on that access request. He knew General Thompson did not make foolish decisions, but a lieutenant's order was an order. Sir, Evans began, but Miller cut him off with a sharp gesture. Now, Master Sergeant, call security if you have to. As Evans reluctantly pulled out his phone, something in his gut told him this was wrong. Dead wrong. Miller's voice rang out across the bay, sharp and final. Base security, this is Lieutenant Miller in Maintenance Bay 7. I need an escort for a civilian, non-compliant. He spoke with the clipped authority of a man who had never truly been tested. Gerald heard the call. He heard the boots of the military police approaching behind him. But for a moment, the humming fluorescent lights and polished concrete floor dissolved around him. The world was not this sterile maintenance bay. It was mud and fire and the screaming chaos of the Iraqi desert in 1991. He was not 78. He was 32. A master gunner with grease smeared across his face and adrenaline burning through his veins. The sound was not diagnostic computers. It was the thunderous percussion of artillery fire, the deep boom of tank cannons tearing through a sandstorm. His Abrams, call sign Bad Penny, had taken a hit. The turret drive was jammed, stuck at a fatal angle. In a tank battle, a turret that would not move was a death sentence. They were sitting ducks. The standard torque wrench was too bulky for the impossible angle. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before an enemy round found them. So Gerald had done what soldiers do when the rulebook fails. He improvised. Under the hellish green glow of chemical lights, using a chunk of metal salvaged from a destroyed Iraqi T-72 and a field welder that sputtered and sparked, he forged a tool. It was ugly, brutal, and perfect. He fitted it into the jam mechanism, threw his weight against it, and felt the turret break free with a metallic scream. Bad Penny's gun swung to target. They fired. The enemy tank exploded in a fireball that lit up the night. His crew lived. That wrench was not just a piece of scrap metal. It was survival. It was brotherhood. It was the moment Gerald Walsh became the man his battalion would call the ghost in the machine. The memory faded, he blinked, and the maintenance base solidified around him again. He saw Lieutenant Miller smirking at him, saw the two military police officers standing at attention, waiting to escort him out like a criminal. He saw the young engineers, their eyes filled with pity and ridicule. They looked at him and saw a relic, a museum piece, a man whose time had passed. They did not see the 14 confirmed kills. They did not see the silver star pinned to his chest in a ceremony at Fort Bragg, the third highest medal for valor the United States Army could give. They did not see the nights he still woke up sweating, hearing the screams of burning men, the smell of diesel and blood. They did not see the workshop behind his small house in rural Kentucky, where he spent quiet afternoons rebuilding lawnmower engines because it was the only thing that made his hands stop shaking. They saw an old man, and that, Gerald thought, with a deep, bone-tired sadness, was the tragedy of it all. Master Sergeant Evans made his decision. He turned his back to Miller, dialed a number he prayed would answer fast. The phone barely rang once. "Major, it's Master Sergeant Evans down in Base 7, he said, his voice low and urgent. "You need to get the general down here right now, the specialist he sent for the Abrams. Lieutenant Miller is having him removed by MPs. I think he's making a very big mistake." There was a pause on the other end, then a string of curses that would have made a drill sergeant blush. "Stay there, Evans. We are on our way." The call ended. Inside the command headquarters, General Thompson listened to the report, his face darkening with every word. "What do you mean Miller is kicking him out?" The general's voice was a low growl, a seismic warning. "Does that arrogant fool have any idea who he is talking to?" He slammed his hand on the oak desk, rattling a row of challenge coins. "Get me the archives. Pull Master Gunner Gerald Walsh's complete service record. Highlight Operation Desert Storm, Battle of 73 Easting. Then get my vehicle. 2 minutes." Back in Base 7, the final act was unfolding. The two MPs stood ready. Miller turned to Gerald with a triumphant smirk. "All right, sir, time to go. We appreciate you stopping by, but we have actual work to do here." Gerald did not argue. He simply looked at the silent Abrams one last time, a flicker of pity in his eyes, and began packing his tools. Each one placed carefully into its worn canvas roll. Then came the sound, the high-pitched squeal of tires on pavement, the sound of extreme urgency. Every head turned toward the massive bay doors. A black command vehicle, flanked by 2 Humvees, slid to a halt outside. The doors flew open. General Thompson stepped out. He was tall, imposing, but today he seemed larger, his presence amplified by cold, controlled fury. The 2 stars on his collar glittered under the lights. He strode into the bay with a velocity that sent a ripple of alarm through every soldier present. The chatter died. Tools stopped clanging. Every man snapped to attention. Miller's face went pale, but the general walked right past him. His polished boots echoed like hammer blows on the concrete. He marched directly to Gerald Walsh and stopped 1 foot in front of him. The entire bay held its breath. Then, in a movement that was crisp, powerful, and utterly sincere, the 2-star general snapped to the sharpest salute of his career. "Master Gunner Walsh," General Thompson's voice boomed, filling the cavernous space. "It is an honor to have you on my post, sir." Gerald, halfway through rolling up his tool bag, slowly straightened. He looked at the general and gave a simple nod. A faint, knowing smile touched his lips. The MPs froze. Lieutenant Miller's jaw went slack. The general dropped his salute but kept his eyes locked on Gerald. Then he turned slowly and deliberately to face the stunned audience. "For those of you who were not properly briefed," he announced, his voice ringing with authority and shame, "allow me to introduce you. This is Gerald Walsh, the man who wrote the book on Abrams maintenance, not the one you checked out at Fort Knox, the real one, written in sweat, grease, and battlefield necessity." The general's voice rose, filling every corner of the bay. In 1991, this man's platoon was ambushed in a sandstorm during the Battle of 73 Easting. Their thermal sights were down. He climbed out of his turret under enemy fire and talked his gunner onto target using binoculars and hand signals. "That is a verified kill." A murmur rippled through the crowd of young soldiers. They looked at Gerald, at his flannel shirt and wrinkled hands, and tried to reconcile that image with the legend standing before them. This man once diagnosed a fleet-wide turbine flaw that stumped the engineers at General Dynamics for 6 months. He did it by listening to the engines whine during a cool-down cycle. He saved the United States Army $50 million and likely dozens of lives. The general took a step toward Miller, his voice dropping to an icy whisper. Lieutenant, you are a fine officer when it comes to networks and systems, but you have a catastrophic gap in your understanding of respect. You failed because you looked at this man and saw his age, not his wisdom. You saw old clothes, not experience. You dismissed the one man on this continent who could solve your problem because he did not fit your profile of a modern soldier. The rebuke was complete. Miller would carry this shame for the rest of his career. The general turned back to Gerald. Mr. Walsh, on behalf of my command, I sincerely apologize. Gerald raised a hand, a gesture of absolution. He's young, General, full of books and fire. We were all like that once. He looked directly at Miller, his eyes holding not malice but profound pity. The machine is just steel and wires, son. It has a voice, a rhythm. You have to learn to listen to it, not just plug it in. Your diagnostics are looking for a broken part. They are not listening for a tired one. He held up his strange, ugly wrench. This helps you listen. Gerald walked to the silent Abrams. He placed his hand flat on the turret casing and closed his eyes. Start the auxiliary power unit, he said quietly. The tank whirred to life. Now traverse the turret, slowly. The familiar sickening groan filled the bay. Gerald tilted his head, listening. Then he knelt, contorted his body, and reached deep into the machinery with his wrench. He gave one firm, precise turn. A metallic thunk echoed from the tank's guts. Try it now. The command was given. The 70-ton turret swung in a smooth, whisper-quiet arc. The groan was gone. The ghost had been laid to rest. Stunned silence washed over the bay, followed by gasps of disbelief. 5 minutes. The problem that had defeated millions of dollars in technology was solved. If this story of quiet valor moved you, leave your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to BR Revenge Stories for more tales of courage and sacrifice.